Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you everybody for joining in for another session of Let's Hatch It Out. Today's session is around jobs and what individuals can do to actually make themselves relevant for years to come by 2030. And for this conversation, we have a guest from UAE. His name is Nauman Asif. He is currently serving as the Chief Financial Officer at Bayt. Bayt is Middle East's #1 job site. He is also a chartered accountant from England and Wales, a fellow member of Chartered Certified Accountants, ACCA, and a Certified Internal Auditor. He started off his career with PricewaterhouseCoopers. For those in the accounting fraternity would know PwC, and then he went on to work for FTSE, which is listed at #1 health and fitness provider in the UK. So Nauman holds more than 18 years of experience working in the job field, and I think it has been like close to 9 to 10 years that he has been associated with Bayt. So I think we couldn't find anyone more relevant to talk about the topic. So welcome, Nauman, today for the session today. So right off the bat, I think I would like you to give your views on some of the macroeconomic conditions, because we have now moved out of the COVID and moved to the post-COVID era. How do you think the current economic conditions is impacting the job market both in the UAE and Pakistan?
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Ali, it's an honor to be on online with you on Hatchet, and it's a very relevant question. The economic challenges that we have been facing during COVID have now sort of changed, and there has been a lot of other macroeconomic factors that are playing their role, which has also impacted the job stabilities, the job market, and obviously the expectations from economic perspective. Now, the challenges that we see post-COVID are hyperinflation that we have been seeing very recently. This has been driven by possible excessive influx of funds into the market. Then we also see the geographical crisis like Ukraine war, which is also pushing the inflationary market forward. Then we are seeing that oil prices are also increasing. So there was a time during COVID when the oil prices went into negative. Now they have sort of gone right at their peak levels. So this is obviously going to have multiple impact in different areas. For example, for a region like UAE, which is more driven by the fossil fuel, or the economy which is more driven by like Saudi Arabia, which is oil rich as well. So there will definitely be economic growth in these regions. And again, as we see that the region grows, you will also see influx of learned, skilled people coming into the region. Of course, as you see prosperity, people obviously would want to take advantage of that. At the same time, the geographical impact due to the war has also sort of seen a lot of people coming in from that region into UAE, into the Middle East. Now, from a Pakistan perspective, of course, there has been some internal challenges with the change of government, the instability, and any government or any economy is fueled by the stability of its structure as well as the economic policies. Now, if you face a challenge with any of those two factors, it has an impact over each and every person. So from an individual perspective, you might, or as a business, you may be flourishing or you may be planning growth. But now if the overarching economic policies are not helping, or the stability within the country is not helping, then obviously whatever your plans are, you will still have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how do we manage those challenges. So from that perspective, we see that there is overall within the world, we see that inflation is coming in. But again, that goes back to your own economy, how stable you are in order to grow. And the growth in the economy obviously drives jobs forward.
Yeah, I think interestingly, we can all agree that yes, rising inflation is one of the causes of the current condition or the outcome of the current condition. And the other one is that people have started spending less. And since people spend less, especially in Pakistan, so you see, businesses being impacted. And we can definitely say that this is for specific industries, but I think we can see that across the board, there are a lot of industries who have one way or the other been impacted. The spending has been, decreasing for some, maybe at a very, harsh rate, and for some it might not be that much. But in either way, the employer side has changed. So what do you think this employer impacted employer side? And both for Pakistan, it might be from an adverse aspect. For UAE, it's like from a good perspective because the economy is doing good. So on both the fronts, what do you think the employer expectations are now from their employees, both in a struggling economy and in a growing economy?
Growing economy. I think this question is very relevant in terms of future skills and future of jobs as well. Now, as I said, the job rate is influenced by how the economy is performing. So, for example, in Middle East, as we grow, the expectations from the market is that ideally there should be job growth as well. Now, the skill gap, what we have seen, so what I would say is within the decade of the 2000s, we saw IT transformation. In the 2010s, we saw social media transition or transformation. Now, within the 2020s, we are seeing a workforce transformation. And now, what that means is we are talking about hybrid working, we are talking about remote working, we are talking about the gig economy, we are talking about how an employer sees its employee and how he engages with them and how they are interacting with the business. So all of that has changed over this period due to COVID because it pushed the boundaries that we were very much used to working in. Now those boundaries have changed. They are more fluid than they used to be. In order for employers and employees to take advantage of that, obviously there is also a requirement for a new set of skills. Now, those set of skills are more on the soft skill sides versus the technical skill side. So technical skills you may or may not be able to acquire within 2 to 3 years. So there is a bigger change that is required to adapt to new technical skills. Whereas on a soft skill perspective, there is a lot of flexibility that is required both from the employer and from the employee perspective. Now, if it's a growing economy and if what we have seen within UAE as well, that the visa regulations have changed. There is a lot more flexibility on how people used to be working. There is freelance visas, there is more remote working visas operating now. And then there is a change that is happening within the regulations in this region. So of course, Pakistan has a more local workforce. They don't require work visas as such. So there the change has been a little bit more different. And with the economy getting impacted, obviously the impact goes back to the workforce. They get challenged because the salary raises are impacted. Inflation plays its impact. So now if you sort of go back into Pakistan, everybody is trying to possibly find greener pasture outside of Pakistan. But for the ones who are in Pakistan, there is that gap that needs to be filled from a flexibility perspective. So how employers are viewing their employees, there is a bit of more emotional change that needs to happen, or there has to be a flexibility from the employer perspective to give them a little bit of more room. Whereas in the UAE, the change obviously is driven by the growth in the economy, where the expectation is that you come in and start delivering sort of immediately. And then, of course, the work environment is built in a way that when a new employee comes in, they are sort of onboarded in a way that, one, they can adapt to the new environment because possibly they are coming from outside, or possibly there is a change of industry or change of skill set. So I feel in the Middle East, the companies are a little bit more flexible on onboarding people and giving them room to grow and to develop and to find their footings. Whereas possibly in Pakistan, that is still or continues to be challenged because you are part of the local workforce.
No, I completely agree. I think the expectation of the employer immediately gets out in the market because they start laying off, and then they introduce new positions for certain new created functions just to adapt to the going change. I mean, we've seen a lot of startups like Airlift, Swivel, and Truckitin, laying off more than 30% of their workforce here in Pakistan. But I think a good thing that we've seen from that is all of the other upcoming startups, they absorbed that talent simply because they were they were experienced, and they had a very relevant experience of a growing startup, which they obviously wanted. But I'm very keen to understand your perspective or your view on the new talent that's now entering the market. So the universities and all the education institutes now know that, and we've been talking about this for, I think, like 2-3 years now, COVID and what to expect after COVID. There have been like so many panel discussions all over the world. And there has been, tremendous amount of discussion around talent, skill, etc. I think now universities must know what's required. But do you think there's still a gap between what the universities and the education institutes are producing and what the employer expectations are now?
So I think that's a great question. And according to World Economic Forum's, 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2025. And I'm not even talking about 5 years from now. I'm talking just about 3 years from now. So in order to reskill, the universities, the educational institute should ideally have already started their work possibly 5 years ago, right? In order to produce the new students with the right skill set. So there is that challenge that the new entrants into the job market will face. And now what I say is that we educate ourselves and we treat it as an investment. Personally, getting yourself a degree, getting yourself a post-graduation degree, these are all investment based on which you will be reaping your returns over a period of time. What I see right now is your education or your certification is more of an insurance. Why? Because that insurance that's a fallback for you. The skill set required and the possible skill set required in future are going to be a lot more different. And that since the universities, the educational institutes haven't filled that gap, those skill sets will be acquired during the job. So that is something that the new entrants will definitely face a challenge with. Now, coming back to, for example, in terms of accountants, for accountants, the the education that they have acquired over a period of time, they are reskilling themselves through the CPD programs, the 40 or the 20 hours that are required. So ideally, they are updating themselves over a period of time. So that may or may not be available for others, or may not be mandatory as such. It is mandatory for the accountant. So for accountants, probably life, they should be reskilling themselves anyways. For the others who have not, who don't have this sort of a stringent regime, they need to really think about what they need to acquire in terms of skill set, and in terms of the in terms of the skills they want to put out there for employers, and to attract the right jobs for themselves. And then this is the gap they need to figure out: what are the skill sets required by employers, and what skills do they have? So COVID obviously has changed a lot of things. So the digital skills are a lot more required now as they were previously. So, and in this case, whatever market has already produced possibly did not get those digital skill sets, which means that you have to acquire them. And this has to be acquired pretty quickly so that you become more relevant. So if you want to find your right job, or if you want to find your next job, possibly you need to have some transformational skills. You may need to have some digital skills. You may need to have skills which are more relevant to the requirements. So if you see the job requirements or the job descriptions have changed a lot, and if you try and see, previously there was just normal, you need a normal accountant, but now this accountant has to do a lot more, because a lot of the work is already done by the ERP systems. So which means there is a strategic skill set or a strategic thinking that needs to be brought in by the employee when he comes to a new job. So yes, there is a new skill set required. Yes, we are now behind in terms of what the universities should have taken steps towards reskilling. And if you really want to be relevant, you need to continuously learn and continuously be able to adapt and be flexible, because some of the skill sets you need to acquire on the go.
I think you just also answered my last question as well, on the areas where people should actually skill themselves, especially if they want to be relevant. I think 2030 is very far off, but by, as you just stated from the World Economic Forum's report, that by 2025 they might have to unlearn a lot of skills and then relearn, or maybe learn some new skills. I think on a last a question, I would like your view on something that has been popping up a lot, especially in terms of skills. Many experts and many employers say that, like you said as well, that the technical aspect is there, you can learn it, and there's and that particular aspect is sometimes taught by the institutes as well. They talk about the emotional aspect, the emotional quotient, or EQ, as it's known for. They say that you have to be very, very high now in EQ, simply because of the current economic conditions and the changing environment and the continuous change of the employer expectations. So your views on that, and then finally, your advice to all the people listening, all the youngsters who are maybe fresh, who just are about to enter the market, or who are currently in the job market in their professional careers, in the mid-level, and lastly for the people who are at the top, who might be thinking that we might get laid off, we haven't actually worked on ourselves, We haven't had all of those continuous professional development sessions or trainings done, so we might be irrelevant. So some advice for, these people as well.
Sure. I think that's a perfect question in terms of where we are and what is the real requirement. For example, you mentioned why is emotional quotient more important now? So if I would sort of take you back in time, and if you try and understand the generations that we have seen, we have had the baby boomers, we have the generation X, we have the millennials, and now we have the generation Z. The difference between the generation, or if I just pick up generation Z, which is the new generation, they are more connected. They have a purpose, or they feel that they have a purpose in life. They want to give something back. They just don't want to do a 9 to 5 job, get the salary and feed their kids, or they want a purpose in life. They want to fulfill a purpose while they're working as well. So the expectations from the generations have changed tremendously. So if I go back to my mom's, and my parents were working for a different set of goals, whereas we are working for a different set of goals, and now the set of goals have changed a bit more, and they want a vision, they want a mission, they want some purpose of life. So hence you see there is a lot more requirement from an emotional perspective. So can we fulfill that emotional need of the employee? So that's one aspect. On the other side, from an employer perspective, there is, and also driven by COVID, there is a lot of communication that is happening within the organization and outside the organization. So now if you want as an organization to be relevant, you need to be communicating all the time. Why? Because the economic drivers are changing very frequently. The economic elements within countries, within the world are changing very fast. So there has to be a continuous dialogue within the organization. Now, what we lack, or what our education sometimes lack, is we are putting up, or we are pushing more for technical skills versus the emotional skills, or versus the interpersonal skills. Once you land a job, staying in that job, growing in that job, is more from an interpersonal skills perspective. How you are communicating within the organization, how are you communicating with your peers, how are you communicating with the management. It is all about how you communicate, how you are engaging, how you are passing that information on. So that basically brings the real person out. The people understand you better if you're obviously able to communicate better. When you're on a board, or when you are discussing with different people from different backgrounds, different education set, now how do you bring all of those together, and how do you build the perfect ideas, is through communicating, or through engaging with each other, or being on the same platform as all the rest. And the only way you can be on the same platform is you are able to share those ideas, or if you're able to communicate. So interpersonal skills are the real skill set that you will need to grow your profile within an organization, and of course be able to share information across. So that's on the emotional side of things. Now, in terms of future of jobs, so the future of job is of course going to be driven by the skill set that the technical skill set that you have acquired, and probably you have a degree to show that, right? So, but as soon as you walk in that door with your CV, they are not looking for the CV, they are looking at you. Now, how you communicate, how you engage is all what they are going to see. So I would say gone are the days when, or probably not as such, but there are more companies looking at how you are performing in an interview from a soft skill perspective versus the hard technical skills. So they want to know if you will be able to adapt to their culture, work culture. They want to see how you are communicating and how you're engaging and how you can think outside of the box. So those elements are a lot more important to employers now, because they know that you have your degree, they know that you are possibly qualified, or you have done masters or done something in your education, in your field of education, and they they know that you have that checkbox done. But now when you come into the real life, these are the skills that they need for you to be able to really produce work for the organization which is relevant. Because if you're able to do a lot of technical stuff but unable to communicate, then you just have lost that ability for organization to learn from you. So hence you need, yes, you need your technical skills, but interpersonal skills is going to drive things forward. And again, the digital skill set that is requirement of the future is something that you need to hold on to now before the sort of the train go past you. So you need to get on that bandwagon as of now to be able to stay relevant.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point to end this conversation as well. I think from somebody who has just joined a company and starting their career to somebody who is already in their careers and at the mid level and somebody who's at the top, the amount of communication or the level of communication and understanding each other increases as you go up in the organization. The more you are at a senior position, the more you have to listen, you have to understand, because it's all about communication. I think there's this wonderful quote that I heard when I was at alums in a training, that was especially in project management. And they said that projects are not destroyed by tornadoes. Projects are destroyed by termites. And that's because those termites are, they can be, miscommunication. Somebody doesn't have the view of what they have to do. And any and every problem has communication behind it, that there was no communication, clear communication, some communication has been missed, etc. So I think for all the viewers who are listening, the key takeaway, if you haven't listened to anything else during our conversation, I think the only key takeaway that you should take with you is that the more effective communicator you are, I think the more beneficial and the more success it will bring you in your career, not only as a professional, but also as a startup founder. And I think that being a startup founder, it becomes equally more important for you to have more communication. So thank you so much, Nauman, for joining in, for taking out the time. And I hope we can, have you for another session sometime in the future as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. It was lovely speaking with you.